Hello. Hi.
Personally, I don't believe in UFOs. Sheila N. was a 44-year-old social worker when she was encouraged to contact me in the summer of 1992 by a psychiatrist at the hospital, where she had done her internship not long before. She was seeking understanding and relief from the stress of what she called electrical dreams that had begun more than 8 years earlier following her mother's death. The psychiatrist Sheila had been seeing for 7 years encouraged her to see me, but it was the hospital psychiatrist's knowledge of and interest in my work that brought us together. Sheila's case illustrates some of the issues that psychiatrists and other mental health professionals confront when working with abductees. Sheila had been very close to her mother, and so her death and the events surrounding the 7-day hospitalization in January 1984 that led up to it were deeply disturbing to Sheila. Sheila's mother had had a heart attack 5 years earlier, and in 1984 was hospitalized for an endarterectomy, a surgical procedure aimed at clearing coronary artery blood flow. She did well at first, but then suffered a cerebral hemorrhage that led to her death several days later. Sheila was unable to find out what the relationship was between the surgery and its fatal complications, and felt that the doctors were abrupt and uncaring toward her mother. She also felt that her mother was unnecessarily maintained on life support after there was no hope, and that thus she was robbed of her dignity. This insensitive treatment was especially troubling to Sheila in view of the history of incest between her mother and her mother's father. In Sheila's words, her mother had been robbed of dignity in her childhood because of her father's sexual demands. Sheila was also angry and sad that her mother's grave was still open with the cover to the vault left exposed and only covered with earth 3 days after she was buried. Following her mother's death, a division developed between Sheila and her husband, who she felt was unable to support her adequately in her grief. "Jim can't deal with illness. He has to be happy," she said. In the days after her mother's funeral, Sheila was in great pain. She would walk the streets at night, feeling very irritable, as if nothing could hurt you any worse, but unable to cry. Sheila wrote in her journal on February 9th, 4 weeks after her mother's surgery, of activity in the night sky. More planes than cars. She also began to have recurring dreams in which she would experience terror, be unable to move, and her body would feel as if it were vibrating or full of electricity. At first she called these spiritual dreams, and they made her feel like someone or something else were controlling her body, as if she were possessed by demons. Later she thought of the dreams as seizures. At this time, just before we met, I described them as if electricity is traveling throughout my whole body. Regardless of the name, the experience of these dreams has not changed. Ordinary dreams, according to Sheila, are more fragmented, whereas in a dream in which she saw alien beings, there seemed to be a natural progression in a certain direction. One of the dreams, which Sheila believes occurred in March 1984, about 10 weeks after her mother's death, was different from the others with respect to certain remembered details. In anticipation of our first meeting, she wrote me about it. "I woke up to a very loud noise with flashing lights. The noise was a high-pitched sound and remained at that tone for the duration. I was struck by the precision of the red flashing lights. Other bedroom doors and the bathroom door were open. I could see down the length of the hall, and it appeared that the lights were coming through the windows on all sides of the house at the same time. At this point in time, I was lying on my back. I was very frightened. I eventually raised myself up on my elbows. I saw several small people-like things walking down the right side of the hall, one behind the other. They looked like their whole bodies were silver in color. I noticed some blue on the first one in line below his right shoulder. It appeared to be a reflection of something, although there is nothing blue in the hall. They were short, with thin arms and legs. As they approached the bedroom, the third or fourth one in the line raised his right hand up. I knew they were coming to me, but I had never seen them before. They appeared to be waddling later. This proved to be an artifact of the flashing light pattern. They were very awkward on their feet, also related to the flashing lights. By October 1984, 9 months after her mother's death, Sheila's estrangement from her husband had reached the point where she felt she had to move to a separate room. I attempted on several occasions to discuss the basis of my sadness with my husband. He would not listen. She also did not feel she could tell him of her strange dreams and moved out of the bedroom in part to protect him and allow him to sleep. He did not protest when Sheila moved out, and they did not sleep in the same room until quite recently. Shortly after this, Sheila asked the pastor of her Methodist church for a referral for psychotherapy, but difficulties arose when the therapist insisted, against her wishes, on talking to the pastor about her. Frustrated with the lack of progress in her weekly appointments and feeling unable to trust her therapist, Sheila's despair deepened. In July 1985, she learned that the pastor, whom she felt close to, was told by his doctors that his life expectancy was 3 to 5 years, due to cancer diagnosed 4 months previously. In addition to the loss of her mother and the pastor's fatal illness, since November 1983, Sheila had also experienced the deaths of other close friends and family members. Refusing to honor Sheila's requests, her therapist still insisted upon talking with the pastor and her husband of her work with him. Feeling desperately bereft and alone, on July 17, 1985, Sheila bought a bottle of aspirin and ingested 20 tablets with every intention of taking them all. Except for general physical discomfort and buzzing in her ears, she suffered no untoward effects. Shortly before I first saw her, Sheila wrote to me that, "Suicide is not my typical coping style, and I want to reassure you it is not my intent to give up under any circumstance." Soon after this episode, Sheila began to see a psychiatrist, Dr. William Waterman. Although she seemed to have resolved her grief over her mother's death, Sheila still felt no closer to understanding or obtaining relief from the electrical dreams, which continued to plague her. A particularly disturbing one occurred on New Year's Eve of 1989. She had been sleeping downstairs, while her daughter Beverly and Jim were in their rooms upstairs. As in 1984, she heard a loud noise and sat up with her body feeling full of electricity. Something forced me down, but she did not recall seeing the small people-like things again. 6 months after the New Year's Eve episode, Sheila wrote to Dr. Waterman, "Prior to January 1st, 1990, I thought all of those whatevers entering my bedroom were only symbols in a dream. Since that time, I have come to recognize the hostility and aggression I experienced with it as a connection to the recurring spiritual dreams. In my dream, those whatevers meant business, and so do I." An article that Sheila saw in her local newspaper in 1985, which she later retrieved, described UFO sightings in the town where her mother was buried. As she wrote to Dr. R., one of the doctors she saw later for hypnotherapy, "This article made me question any involvement my mother had to do with all of this." Later, she would piece together the sightings with what she had heard, read, or seen about abduction experiences, and began to question if, indeed, her electrical dreams were dreams at all, and whether it was really true that her continuing fear of the night was related to delayed grief over her mother's death. On July 14, 1990, Sheila wrote to Dr. Waterman, "I told you long ago that it is my firm belief that these dreams go far beyond loss, but I simply had nothing more to add to that. Determined to conquer my fear of the night whatever it takes, and wanting desperately to put an end to these dreams, Sheila and Dr. Waterman explored other approaches, especially ways of uncovering buried memories. They considered and rejected the possibility of an amytal interview. Finally, and with reluctance on Sheila's part, in the summer of 1990, at Dr. Waterman's recommendation, she contacted a psychiatrist, Dr. Fred Frankel, at a Harvard Medical School teaching hospital, who specialized in the therapeutic use of hypnosis, in order to explore the source of her symptoms and to obtain relief from her anxiety. He asked another psychiatrist, Dr. R., who had an interest in learning more about hypnosis, to call Sheila. A careful workup of Sheila's case included, in addition to the history, a neuropsychological evaluation of possible temporal lobe epilepsy and an all-night sleep study. In his note referring Sheila to behavioral neurology, Dr. R. wrote that in one of Sheila's dreams, she is sitting on her bed and sees several little figures. The first one stood at the foot of her bed and the second one by the door. They walked in an awkward way and had the shape of a small humanoid body. In another dream, he continued, she is lying down with a blanket over her and saw two of these small beings standing over her. The psychologist who did the neuropsychological evaluation described Sheila's sleep disturbance, but noted that she denies other current symptoms of depression. The psychologist put together a high school incident in which Sheila sustained a minor injury on the right side of her head that led to nausea and light sensitivity for several days, with some difficulty concentrating during the testing, variability of attentional functioning, and motoric restlessness, and suggested a possible diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactive disorder. Sheila wrote in the margin of a copy of the report she sent me beside these words, "I will never believe this is true of me." Noting Sheila's tension during the examination, in addition to her history, the psychologists also considered the possibility of an anxiety disorder and a post-traumatic stress disorder, given the trauma of her mother's death, her experience of nightmares, and her exaggerated startle response. They concluded, however, intelligence testing found her to be a very bright woman, functioning in the above-average and superior range. An all-night sleep study found nothing remarkable except anxiety and poor sleep. According to her records, between August 1990 and July 1992, Sheila had 24 appointments with Dr. R. and/or Dr. Frankel, which included at least 7 hypnosis sessions. The appointments were generally 1 hour, and the hypnosis ranged from 15 to 22 minutes. In a letter to me, Dr. Frankel wrote of Sheila's concern when he first saw her about the vault being left open overnight, and said she expressed her sadness over her mother's death and other aspects of the history recorded here. In her journal, Sheila wrote that Dr. Frankel cautioned her in 1991 that although hypnosis could be of benefit in producing new material, it does not guarantee accurate recall and can be an extension of a personal fantasy or experience. The focus of the treatment was on the impact of her mother's surgery, death, and funeral, and on cognitive behavioral approaches aimed at reducing the distress of her dreams, especially by asserting to herself they were not reality. "I never felt safe," Sheila said of the treatment process. In May 1992, Sheila accepted a prescription for Klonopin, 5 mg, to combat her anxiety, and in June for an antidepressant, Wellbutrin, 100 mg, to be taken at bedtime. She continued both medications until early August. In Sheila's view, Dr. Frankel continued to connect her dreams with depression. In his letter to me, Dr. Frankel stressed that hypnosis may not lead to accurate memories, and also wrote that whether or not she is subject to delusion or deeply religious beliefs is similarly difficult to answer. He said that my willingness to accept what people like Sheila say was much more than neutrality, and he argued that although my kindness, sympathy, and support toward Sheila may have led to therapeutic improvement, that does not necessarily confirm the theories that surround UFOs and abductions. I discussed all of these issues in a meeting with Dr. Frankel, who generously agreed to schedule a grand rounds at his hospital to discuss them further in a medical academic setting. During the well-attended rounds, the issues raised by Sheila's case were discussed. Dr. Frankel, on the basis of his research in other types of cases, again doubted that hypnosis could lend credibility to Sheila's abduction reports. The complex questions surrounding memory and hypnosis in abduction cases are discussed in Appendix A. Sheila told Julia, another abductee with whom she talked at length before I was able to see her, that under hypnosis she saw a skeleton with no nose or mouth, a curling iron with a handle and a rotating pencil tip, like a drill, a 12 by 18-inch long rectangle, the color of pie crust with slits cut in rows that created a great amount of fear in her. And she also remembered her arms being stretched out and tied down with rubber tubing. In notes to me in early January 1993, Sheila wrote, "I did not discuss these with Dr. Frankel as they occurred because I was afraid he would reject these and I would be left feeling alone with them. I did tell him about these collectively well after the fact. He asked me how I responded to them at the time. I told him that I immediately replaced it with a vision of a beautiful flower garden full of hummingbirds. He commented favorably on this, and I perceived his comment as encouragement to turn away from fear." At some point during the course of the evaluation and treatment, in response to showing him the article about the UFO sighting in 1985, Sheila told me that Dr. Frankel said, "Personally, I don't believe in UFOs." On 2 occasions when they were alone, according to Sheila, Dr. R said, "You don't really believe in Martians, do you?" She says she never used the word Martians and found these comments condescending, and they undermined her trust in him. Dr. Frankel and Dr. R say that they did not make these statements. Sheila wrote to me of how difficult it was for her to challenge a professional with what she felt were errors. "I wanted help so much, and I was always fearful of losing it," she wrote, "even when I recognized I wasn't really being helped at all." On July 31st, 1992, she wrote to both psychiatrists, terminating her work with them. She says she would have preferred to speak with each in person, but we were having difficulty scheduling time when I assumed full employment. Both letters, which she has given me copies of, are appreciative, courteous, and frank. To Dr. Frankel, she wrote of moments where I have felt a lack of understanding and acceptance. Over time, she stated, I have come to think that there is a relationship between the single dream and those that reoccur. I desperately wanted to believe otherwise. It simply does not make sense in the world as I know it to be. It is my feeling that a clearer understanding of this relationship is the only way I can experience freedom from it all. She also noted a paradox in relation to the dream of March 1984 and asked, why did I fall asleep when every other terrifying dream wakes me up? Why was the setting of it in my bedroom when that is where I was when I had this dream? And finally, the ultimate question, was it a real experience? And if so, what happened that is so painful for me to remember? In her letter to Dr. R, she thanked him for the feeling of security that his presence during the hypnosis sessions had given her, and then explored further than in the letter to Dr. Frankel, the sense of actuality she had of the beings in her room in the 1984 episode and the seemingly purposeful pattern of their deployment about the room. She also echoed the experience of so many abductees when she wrote, "What a horrible and terrifying thought that you can't protect your own child," in reference to her suspicion that Beverly has had abduction experiences as well in the privacy of your own home. In saying goodbye, Sheila concluded, I do think that our work really ended the day. Dr. Frankel said, personally, I don't believe. I know what I saw, and I can only say that this experience changed my life. One of the first questions Dr. Frankel asked me, she continued, was if I thought I have a creative imagination. It took me 8 years to get this far, so I guess my answer is no. I will figure this out, she ended, or die trying. In replying thoughtfully to her letter, Dr. Frankel wished Sheila well and urged her to forget the most disturbing dreams as best she could and to take a mild tranquilizer so that she could gain some respite from her distress. Shortly after she wrote these letters, Sheila spoke with Dr. T, the psychiatrist and friend who encouraged her to contact me. In May, she had taped the CBS miniseries on abductions, Intruders. Although she had been unable to watch it herself, she brought the tape with her to the meeting with Dr. T, which was supposed to be about a project which was an extension of her master's thesis. Putting aside the discussion they had planned, Sheila declared that she had another agenda, namely to connect, possibly by writing a book, her abduction-related experiences with healthcare professionals to the question of patient satisfaction. She told Dr. T about her experiences and her struggle to get help in dealing with them, and gave him the tape of the miniseries, which he much appreciated. Of the March 1984 experience, she told him, there was a possibility that it wasn't a dream anymore. On August 12th, Dr. T and Sheila met again, by which time he had compared Sheila's story and the Intruders' cases. He told Sheila, writing the book is one way, but this is another way. And he gave her my name and phone number. The next day, she called my office. I was unable to see Sheila for several weeks and asked Julia to speak with her. They met on August 27th, and Sheila found their conversation greatly comforting. She said it helped her confirm the possibility of a relationship between the electrical dreams and the March 1984 experience. Sheila said that the night before their meeting, Beverly reported she had awoken about 5 o'clock in the morning, incredibly scared, with an unexplained green light shining into her bedroom through a large window fan, creating a flashing effect and illuminating the wall opposite her bed. The meeting with Julia was the first time Sheila felt that someone had heard and understood her. On September 1st, Julia told me that Sheila had called her to tell her that the night before, she had had another electrical dream in which she had been paralyzed with great pain in her hip, where she felt a needle had been inserted into the bone. She felt intense fear and desperation, and I agreed to meet with her as soon as my schedule permitted. We talked at length on the phone a few days later, and our first meeting, a 4-hour session which consisted of a review of Sheila's history and a long hypnosis session, was scheduled for September 21st. Sheila grew up in a small city west of Boston. She is the middle of 5 children. "My family of origin is close," she wrote in one of her communications to me. Her father was a commercial airline pilot who was away a great deal when Sheila was young. Although retired, he still travels a lot, mainly now between Maine and Florida. "He does not admit to seeing a UFO," Sheila said, "but he wouldn't believe them either." "My mother never missed an opportunity to instruct us on proper etiquette in our youth," Sheila wrote me after reviewing the first draft of my write-up of her case. "She was a true lady and always strived to set a good example for us." In Sheila's view, her mother protected us a lot when the children were growing up, which may be related to the history of incest. As a small child, Sheila attended the Presbyterian church, then went to the Congregational church, and in high school began going with friends to the Methodist church, where she became close to the pastor, who first referred her for counseling after her mother's death. She attended Sunday school as a child, and the Bible became important to her. Beverly now attends a Christian school. Sheila always viewed God as a source of energy, but her abduction experiences, or more accurately, the way these experiences complicated the grieving process after her mother's death, challenged her faith. According to the Bible, she told me shortly before her first regression, "You should love God more than your parents." I was angry with myself because that wasn't how I was feeling. As a child and adolescent, Sheila was musically and athletically inclined and socially active. "I like to be with people," she said. She met her husband Jim, who is now a school teacher, when she was a sophomore in high school and he was in college. After college, Jim enlisted in the army for 3 years and encouraged Sheila to date other men, which she did. But my heart wasn't in it. She actively pursued Jim, writing to him every day while he was in the army. He tried to pawn me off on his brother, but I just hung in there. Rather self-disparagingly, she says that after Jim came out of the army, all his friends from high school and college were scattered, so I was the only one left. They were married in 1970 and Beverly was born in 1975. Sheila says that the marriage was good until after her mother's death and the electrical dreams began. Sheila attended college and social work school at Massachusetts institutions, initially obtaining her license in 1980. With characteristic persistence, when circumstances permitted, Sheila returned to graduate school and finished in 1991. At the time of our first meeting, she was working in the adult psychiatry unit of a general hospital west of Boston. The first recollection Sheila has of experiences that might be related to the abduction phenomenon is an incident that occurred before she was 6. She and her brother saw something during the night they called the gore. Sheila wrote me later that the gore, without a doubt, had the same appearance as the beings that entered my bedroom in 1984. Another incident occurred between ages 6 and 8. I saw someone walk out of the closet in her bedroom, she said. She screamed and her parents came in, checked the room and reassured her that she had had a bad dream, but I guess I had my reservations. I felt it was real. The being was quite tall and shadowy in appearance. It walked toward her window and disappeared. To this day, Sheila keeps her closet door closed. Even before our first regression, Sheila associated this being with the entities she saw in her room in 1984. It was the same as coming into the bedroom 8 years ago. When she was in her early teens, Sheila was driving in a car with her mother and 1 or 2 of her siblings, while the other children and her father were in a second car. With 5 children, they had to take 2 cars. on a visit to her paternal grandparents. Each person in the car that Sheila was in saw a bright light which looked like a bolt of lightning, but was straight, just above and parallel to the horizon. It was just one of those things you couldn't explain. Before she began therapy in November 1984, Sheila shared her March 1984 experience with her sister Melissa. Melissa took it seriously, gave Sheila a hug, asked for details, and told Sheila of her own related experiences. But until 1989, Sheila still dismissed the possibility that it could be real. As she pointed out, it's no wonder that those who have not experienced it have so much trouble accepting. What Melissa told Sheila was of an incident when she was 7 or 8 and Sheila was 13 or 14, and she saw something big and silver in the sky that so disturbed her she was shaking and crying. When she told her father, he dismissed her with, "It's just a blimp, don't worry about it." Melissa continued as an adult to be troubled by this memory and sought help from a hypnotherapist. But whenever she would get close to bringing up the experience, she would start to shake and cry again. Melissa, to whom Sheila feels very close, she's wonderful, has told Sheila that under hypnosis she has seen different colored reflections in association with the object, blue on one occasion and orangey pink on another, but because of her terror, the hypnosis has not been productive. When Melissa was in her early 20s, she saw a ball of light come through the sliding doors of her apartment, bounce around the room, go down the hall and into another room, and through a wall. She was with a friend, and they both ignored the phenomenon until Melissa said, "Wait a minute, the curtains are closed. It's not a light from a car going down the street." As Sheila related, they followed the light around the room before it went back outside through the same sliding doors. When Sheila told a cousin of her father's about coming to see me, the cousin told her that she had seen a UFO in her neighbor's backyard, and that Sheila's older sister, Laura, had had an experience with a loud noise and red lights resembling Sheila's. But Sheila and Laura are quite different, and Laura never told her of this incident. Sheila's daughter Beverly's possible involvement in the abduction phenomenon is an important element in Sheila's determination to explore her experiences. She, like many abductees who are parents, is deeply troubled that she cannot protect her child. When Beverly was 14 or 15 months old and still sleeping in her crib, Sheila remembers waking in the middle of the night and going downstairs in the dark, which was very unusual for her. She saw something white across the stair and wondered what she might have left there. When she turned on the light, she saw it was Beverly, sound asleep in her pajamas without a blanket. When Beverly was about 8, Sheila took her to the pediatrician for a possible ear infection. The doctor removed an object about the size of a pencil eraser with junk all over it and discarded it. Beverly insisted, weeping, that she had not put the object in her ear. Yet she told Sheila that as far back as she can remember, she covers this ear with her sheet and blanket to keep it from being exposed. As is characteristic of child abductees, Beverly had frequent unexplained nosebleeds when she was little. Sheila and I met on September 21st, October 12th, and November 23rd for hypnotic regressions. Dr. Waterman was present during the second and third sessions. As I had not seen her before, half of our first meeting was given over to filling in details of Sheila's family background, personal history, and the experiences she and her family had undergone that might be related to abduction experiences. Initially, she appeared to be a rather timid, anxious, and soft-spoken woman who was clearly determined to forge through considerable distress to meet with me. Her anxiety, I later discovered, was increased by the troubling elements of her previous experiences with doctors. Her concern with control and the fear of losing it were evident from the outset. Before beginning the first regression, whose objective was the recovery of material related to the March 1984 experience, Sheila and I reviewed her conscious memories of the episode, and I asked her to draw the layout of the rooms and sleeping arrangements in her house. Just before the start of the regression, Sheila was talking with me about the changes in religious faith and feelings of isolation she had been experiencing. In the hypnosis sessions, Sheila spoke very softly, while her body movements reflected intense energies that corresponded to the tremendous pressures and other forces she was experiencing. Before the second session, I asked Pam Casey to take notes describing these movements and will report them in that respect. Under hypnosis, Sheila immediately spoke in a very soft tone of feeling scared of the noise and the lights. I took her back to an earlier point in the night and asked her to describe the process of going to bed. She said that she had gone to bed about 11 o'clock after her husband and tried unsuccessfully to get him to give her a hug. They were still sleeping in the same bed at that time. She believes that she went to sleep lying on her left side, but the next thing she actually recalls was being awake on her back, hearing a very loud, high-pitched noise. I can't scream louder than that noise, and seeing an evenly blinking red light coming in all the windows all over the place. Jim looked like he was dead, she said. His mouth was open and the lights made him look like a funny color. She became so frightened at this point that I had to reassure Sheila that the beings would not come into the room we were working in. Later she wrote me, "The greatest benefit in this was that I was certain that I was not alone. I knew you were there." Feeling confused, Sheila pushed herself up on her elbows and saw several of those things coming down the hall. One of them raised his hand as if to signal to others. With her breath coming in gasps, and with much encouragement on my part to breathe deeply and to recenter herself, Sheila described 3 figures with skinny arms and legs that came in a straight line into her room. 2 of them came to the end of her bed, and the blinking lights and noise ceased as the beings at the bottom of her bed stared at her, just looking. Her fear mounting, Sheila told me that she wanted to lie down again so the beings would not see her, but realized this was to no avail. "I know they're going to come to me. I feel that," she said. 2 of the beings came beside her, and one stood over Jim. She looked at their eyes and saw power, but could not speak of this further. Part of her terror, Sheila then realized, was that she had seen the beings before. "I know them, and I don't want to see them." Her fear seemed to reach a crescendo as her body writhed in awful contortions and her limbs twisted about, tensing and relaxing. "Their eyes are so ugly," she said, and reported that she feared the being's touch. Thrashing and turning, Sheila now saw a white light above her and felt her arms being held to her sides. "This is not my bedroom," she announced, and moaned, "I want to go home. I don't know how I got here." There were now a lot of beings, coming and going. It's hard to count them because they're all over. Sheila felt she had been forced to lie down and said that the beings took my energy. "There is power in those eyes," she declared. Something touched her on the abdomen, and they won't let my arms go. They always do that. Then she felt the horrible pressure and pain of something square pressing into her body through the lower abdominal wall. "The scary part is you're not in control," she says. Sheila did her best with my help to overcome her generally ladylike ways and to express the rage and humiliation she was obviously feeling. But all she could do was say she would like to kick the beings, tie them up, and send them home. She described their funny-shaped and hairless fat heads and pronounced, "They don't look like us." "The scariest thing about the beings is the eyes," Sheila said. "They're so big. They're different." Tiring now, giggling and punning weakly, she said, "Maybe they're from God, with big temples." Toward the end of the regression, I asked Sheila to describe where she was. "It doesn't look like my bedroom," she said. "I feel like I'm on a table, which feels hard. Her body feels hot from the fighting and trying to get away." She returned to the power of the eyes, especially of the one she called the leader. "He controls with his eyes. Everyone respects him." The experience of just their eyes and my eyes was like neuro-linguistic programming, Sheila added. "They take control and then you don't have the energy to fight." Before stopping, I asked her to give her perspective on the reality of what she had gone through. "I know it happened," she said somewhat sadly. I spoke with Sheila the next day as part of my follow-up routine. She felt confused and vulnerable now, for the experience had seemed so real. She was determined to prevent these dreams. I said that I did not know how to help her do that, but might be able to assist her in coming to terms with her experiences. She agreed to join in the mystery with me. Dr. Waterman had heard me lecture on the subject of abduction experiences and was open to the possibility that Sheila's case might be an example of this phenomenon. He cleared his schedule to come to our next regression. Sheila seemed more self-confident when she arrived for the second regression. Despite her fear, her recollection of the disturbing emotions of the first session and a feeling of tremendous personal violation, that someone could enter your home and invade your space, she was determined, almost eager to continue. "I've lived with it long enough," she declared. Later, Sheila wrote me of how our first session broke her isolation, validated her experience, and bolstered her strength and determination. In the course of reviewing what had happened during the first session, she said, "I don't care what anyone thinks. I know what I saw." She spoke disappointedly of a friend whom she generally trusted and had told of her abduction experiences. "But the friend doesn't believe me," Sheila said, and lamented that people think that we have a discrete universe that we know about, and they don't want to work with anything beyond those boundaries. We reviewed the first session, which she recalled quite accurately, except that the square instrument that was pressed through her abdominal wall she now remembered as rectangular, approximately 1 by 2.5 inches. Typically conscientious, Sheila assured me she had not meant to lie, but she was so disconcerted by her pain that she could not speak clearly. She asked for some direction, some goal, and I suggested we explore further the March 1984 incident, picking up where we had left off. Once again, Sheila described the bright lights, the noise, her fear and confusion, and how frustrated she felt when she could not wake her husband. She spoke of beings coming into the room and to her bed, and again focused on the leader's eyes. "He scares me," she said, "but I've got to see him better." Now the eyes appeared black, not brown, and staring into them gave her the feeling that there's this black all around me. She felt she couldn't breathe, squished, unable to move, and covered with black stuff. I felt like I was in a black box. She had the sense that she fell asleep for 2 seconds, and then I saw a light, just white on top. "It's too bright." Then she was on the table, feels great for a moment, before becoming intensely afraid as she was shown needles by my eyes. Sheila's body movements and other behavior, as described in Pam Casey's notes, tell the story of her relived experience more powerfully than her words. She clenched and unclenched her hands and stretched her arms. Her legs twitched, and her eyebrows became furrowed. Her shoulders tensed, and she shuddered almost convulsively. Her breathing became labored, then quiet. Sometimes there were long silences and small, restless movements. The needles were stuck, right in my forehead. At first this was painful, but then I just relaxed. The needles in her head seemed to cause her right hand and arm to become numb. Then the leader walked up to her with something that looked like a fan with a needle in it. "I tried to stop him because I'm afraid of it," she said. Then her legs tensed up and twitched as she described his approaching them with the fan-like instrument. Her legs were a little bit far-sick apart, the left straight and the right bent, as one of the figures stuck the fan's needle into the side of her left leg. Sheila wanted to scream as she said, "Take it out of me, take it out of me," but could only moan softly, even with my encouragement. Even after the needle was removed from her leg, it still felt stiff and sore. After this, she saw a lot of the beings standing over me. She was embarrassed to have no clothes on. Then there was something coming over me that looked rather like an electric shaver with something black underneath it. "I can tell they're holding it," she said, as one of the beings keeps putting it on me, and dragged it across her abdomen from the left to right side, causing her to feel cold. This seemed to be the black rectangle she had spoken of before. Her body now became more tense and agitated, and Sheila groaned as she told of the shaver-like instrument being pressed on my right side, very low, where I imagine my right ovary or appendix is, while they're trying to hold my right leg down. She felt intense pain as the instrument was held here. Sheila said, "I just have to balance myself. It feels like they're going to go through the other side." Can you imagine an elephant balancing on one leg? i.e., standing on one leg on her abdomen. Then she had the feeling that an instrument outside her body was sucking stuff out from the inside of my body. After a few minutes, Sheila's body became more still, and she pulled restlessly at her shirt as she declared, "I'm hot." She did not take the time to pay attention to what was removed through the wall of her abdomen. She was clear, however, that she saw the black rectangle. She spoke again of her fear, anger, and pain, and then said, "I see their eyes. I don't want to see them anymore." At this point, the scene changed, and Sheila was shown something that looked like a huge red stained glass window with brown and gold latticework separating the panes that curved vastly toward a dome. Such windows lined the entire length of a long wall. The feeling she had was, "I really am here." The cone-shaped dome was so awesome in its towering depth above her that it scares me to look at it. At the same time, the display seemed very beautiful, like the Northern Lights, a fountain of pure gold. The sense of depth seemed to be created by record-like grooves that spiraled upwards. When I asked Sheila what made this so frightening, she could only say, "It's like power. I can't tell you anymore." She said, "I want to go home," and recalled nothing further. "They took my memory away," she concluded. After coming out of the regression, Sheila said she felt sad, which she attributed at first to feeling like I wasn't dressed and being so out of control. Trying to return to her ladylike manner, Sheila said, "My deodorant failed me under these circumstances. I'm soaked." But more significantly, she observed how troubling it was to find out that my body is not my own. Dr. Waterman was impressed with the power and apparent authenticity of what Sheila had gone through in the session, and over the next few weeks struggled with his shifting views of her case so that he could be more helpful to her, joining in the mystery with us. In a follow-up telephone call, Sheila expressed deep gratitude for our work, spoke of the isolation she had felt as a result of not being believed, and expressed her determination to force a sense of accountability in the psychiatric profession in regard to abduction experiences. She spoke of her desire to do research that would integrate her experience with caregivers in relation to the abduction phenomenon, with her interest in patient satisfaction. Julia and Sheila had a long telephone conversation several days after the regression. Sheila wanted to know that I believed her and had many questions about hypnosis and the processes of remembering and forgetting. She wondered if there is distortion in hypnosis and what prevented her memories from surfacing on their own without it. She speculated that it could be fear. Julia concluded, "I was very impressed with the strength Sheila is exhibiting. This Sheila seems like a different person to me. She can hold her own in a conversation where before she was too timid and insecure, always holding back tears. To me, this is the most fascinating aspect of the whole abduction phenomenon, how coming to terms with what is buried in memory can affect your whole life." Before beginning the third hypnosis session, which was also attended by Dr. Waterman, we reviewed what had occurred during the 6 weeks since the last meeting. Just 3 nights before, at about 3 o'clock in the morning, Sheila had had another dream, like the electricity in what she called a semi-conscious state. I woke up real quick and I could hear someone breathing funny and I felt a hand on my side. She jumped up, screamed in terror, turned on the light and saw no one there. Yet the pressure of what felt like a hand on her hip and a short click sound that she took for breathing seemed altogether real. Although sometimes now she feels strong, even at night, on some nights, like the one above, she is frightened by the sense that there's someone in the room with you and you can't see anybody. She is especially troubled by the lack of control and knowing she cannot protect Beverly. She captured the feeling of most abductees when she said, "You're always living with a certain amount of fear that it's going to happen again." After this discussion, we talked about Sheila's first experience in my support group. People are at different levels, she accurately observed. The experiencers are all in the same boat, she noted, a boat at this point in time I can't deny. She spoke then of the overwhelming impact of acknowledging her experiences and the difficulty of finding anything positive in them. "I don't know if I'd want to live forever under someone else's control," she said. She was having difficulty living with the implications of what she was discovering in the hypnosis sessions. Just that there are greater powers, how insignificant we are as human beings, and that you have maybe transformed some barrier. Of the beings themselves, she wondered, where do they come from? Most disturbing to Sheila, worse than the fan and the needle and the tube and electric razor and the needles in my forehead, was the blackness. "It's a terrifying experience of the black," she said, looking in their eyes to figure out how they got there, and then it gets covered with black. Sheila had resolved to explore the experience of New Year's Eve 1989, in which she had experienced the electricity and felt that something forced me down, but did not see the beings. Before we began the hypnosis, she recalled waking at about midnight and again at 1:15, hearing a noise and feeling like someone had their hands on my arms and my legs. They stretched me face down on the couch. They stretched me out. I sat up and didn't see anything. I was scared out of my mind. I was terrified to be alone. In the beginning of the regression, we went over the events of that New Year's Eve. In a journal entry of January 12, 1990, Sheila had written, "I have been truly frightened at night since. It was the worst one dream I have had in a long time." This evening, Sheila's father, her sister Melissa, and Melissa's daughter Kimberly had come over to join Sheila, Jim, and Beverly. They left about 11, and Sheila went to bed at 11:30, because I was tired. Beverly had just persuaded Sheila to switch bedrooms, as Sheila's was larger and had a telephone. Explaining that she did not have the time to prepare Beverly's former room for her own sleeping, Sheila decided to sleep downstairs on a long sofa in the sunroom. She took a pillow from upstairs and covered herself with an afghan, feeling sad as she thought about her mother's not being there. Sheila wrote in her journal that as she prepared to go to sleep, "I was scared out of my mind. I was terrified to be alone. The sunroom, which is off to the side of the house, was so far away from Jim and Beverly." She recalled the humming sound of the humidifier and hearing the swinging of the pendulum of a downstairs clock. She believes that despite her fear, she was able to fall asleep. She was awakened about midnight. The clock on the VCR said 12:02, according to her notes of January 12, 1990, and frightened by fireworks that seemed to be coming from across the street where the people have company. They're entertaining tonight. Then she was frightened by a light that came into the room and said, "It's too bright." Then the light is gone, and Sheila said, "I got to watch for that light." She was still awake when a clock struck 12:30. I took her back to when she looked at the VCR clock and asked her what she did next. She said that she stood by the window and looked out at a light on a pole in her neighbor's driveway and attributed the light in her room to this source. Then, despite fear of such intensity it caused her to shake, she recalled lying down again on the couch to escape her fear. She remembered looking at the large organ in the living room nearby and seeing plants in the room. Her fear was mounting at this point, both in the experience that she was recalling and in the session itself. Lying on her left side, Sheila tried to close her eyes. Despite her terror, Sheila said she was able to fall asleep. It took a little while. I was very tired. Stressing again how alone she felt so far away from Jim and Beverly, Sheila said, "I saw that light again. I tried to find it. It seemed to come from the side of the house. It's real bright. Then I looked at it. Then it was real black. She was afraid of the light and asked how to make it go away. Then, in the light, she saw something orange and pink with a dark spot on it. Now on her back instead of her side, she experienced a light so bright that she asked me, 'Did you just flash a light?' Next, she was in the middle of grey and stuff all around me that is like mist." In her journal entry of January 12, 1990, Sheila had written, "Grey and V-shaped. I couldn't see them." The entry continues, "But there were 2 of them at each point, my neck, each upper arm, and about 6 above my ankles. 5 sets of 2 in all. The only way I can describe them is that they hurt me, and these 2 sets were perfectly symmetric. Any other way I could feel them even after I woke up. They seemed so real." Her breathing was labored and gasping now, and she felt as if she were standing but would like to lie down. She spoke of feeling not cold, as if she were in some kind of grey bubble that was room temperature, with no defined walls or a flat ceiling. Then Sheila said bluntly, "I just saw their eyes. I want to get away from them. They're right in front of me." "Where?" I asked. "By the grey stuff." A great struggle now ensued, in which Sheila was drawn to look at the eyes, but also avoided them and wanted to make them go away. She noted how big and intense the eyes were, and I never see them blink. Compelled to look into them, she acknowledged, "I see the eyes." Although this admission, or the act of looking into the eyes, or both, made her feel more relaxed, Sheila felt at the same time that this made her feel like I could be crazy, like you don't know what you're doing, like you could be like psychotic or something, like you're not in touch with reality. Virtually whimpering now, Sheila described the terror of giving up control. "They're in control," she said. "I have to surrender it." She felt exploited by them, but at the same time that we depend on each other. Her thoughts returned to the too bright flashing light which terrified her. Then Sheila saw something orange outside the window, very low to the ground. With enormous difficulty, despite much encouragement on my part, she was able to say only, "I saw a big orange oval mass." Sheila asked to go back to the eyes and talk about depending on them. "They just told me that," she said after she surrendered control. Acknowledging that neither she nor I really understood what it meant, Sheila said, "We're both depending on each other. I have to accept the being's presence in my life, or at least that he comes to me in the night time. She does not believe he would come to me in the daytime." When I asked her how this information was communicated to her, she said, "I just know. I know what he's thinking. He communicates, but he can't tell you how." She was not happy with all this. I don't like him there, but accepts the truth of what she has acknowledged. Sheila had considerable difficulty steadying herself to sit up after the hypnosis was terminated. She connected the eyes clearly with the blackness she had experienced in the previous regressions. The eyes are scary. Well, I was looking at their eyes, and then I was surrounded with black. All I could see was black. This time she did not feel surrounded with blackness when she looked into the eyes. She even found that she relaxed, but found the idea that we depend on each other frightening because they are not friendly. You wouldn't invite them over for the holidays. She wondered if they were deceptive. You can't depend on someone who's deceptive. You can't rely on them. But she was not sure about this. We talked together about how interdependence occurs when you surrender control. When I looked in their eyes, we talked about depending on each other, and I started thinking about systems theory, ecology. But now that I'm awake, I think that, well, it's very difficult to think they're around. I think they're around in the daytime, even though I don't see them. Sheila struggled further with the problem of control. I don't see the balance, like when you look in their eyes, and then they're in control, and you surrender the control, then that's when you depend on each other. But I don't see the balance in logical thinking. We talked further about the human desire to be in control and the destructive consequences of this. You have to surrender to achieve balance, she said. Human beings have been socialized to be in control in the daytime. That's the daytime control, she added. Nighttime you surrender for that perfect balance. We ended on the question of whether the nighttime surrender of control could have any payoff for the day. I think it could, Sheila said. How? I asked. Well, that's what I don't know the answer to, she said. Dr. Waterman was impressed with what happened in this session and the days that followed. Sheila continued to integrate what had come up in this session, especially in their meetings. Troubling details returned that she had actually set down in her journal on January 12, 1990, but which had not come up in our session, especially concerning the V-shaped points. Still, Sheila seemed to Dr. Waterman to be a different person, smiling, worried for him. His father had recently died, and much more self-assured. Later, she wrote me that she was impressed with major changes in his outlook, shifting views. Something was different. I saw her at the support group on December 14th, 3 weeks after the last session. She seemed more energetic, with a bright, direct look in her eyes, and said she felt more hopeful. We talked about her efforts to help another abductee who was struggling with feelings of hopelessness in the dawning realization of her experience, just as Sheila had done. Discussion. It is difficult for us to admit when we do not know something. In psychiatry, there is a tendency, natural enough perhaps, to try to fit psychological data or emotional phenomena into familiar categories. Total uncertainty is very uncomfortable. In Sheila's case, the emergence of her electrical dreams and other features of a traumatic condition following her mother's death created a certain logic that argued for an explanation of her case on the basis of unresolved grief, depression, or a post-traumatic stress disorder related to the death of her mother, to whom she had in fact been close. Yet various therapeutic efforts that followed this direction failed to relieve Sheila's distress, and by the end of the summer of 1992, she had become increasingly desperate. In retrospect, there were several features of Sheila's case that do not fit the diagnosis of delayed grief reaction or depression alone. Although anxious about the intrusive and disturbing electrical dreams, her principal symptom, there was nothing in them that pointed to a preoccupation with loss, separation, or other characteristics of grief. Nor was there the deep loss of self-esteem, nor the self-reproach that is likely to accompany clinical depression. Even the impulsive suicide gesture in July 1985 was in response to a genuine problem of confidence in a therapist at a time when she was feeling particularly desperate and alone. Sheila did in fact show features of a post-traumatic stress condition with general anxiety, troubling dreams, and difficulty sleeping. But the question to be answered concerns its source. The death of her mother was troubling to Sheila, as was the estrangement from her husband. There was little, however, in her reaction to these events, to which she seemed to have adapted reasonably well, or the content of her dreams to suggest that they were the principal source of her ongoing traumatized state. A neuropsychological evaluation early in 1991 documented Sheila's anxiety, but did not show evidence of depression and described her as functioning in the above-average to superior range. No other cause of her trauma, aside from the abduction experiences, has been uncovered. Sheila's case demonstrates typical features of the abduction phenomenon. These include frightening dreams that seem more real than ordinary nightmares, memories, some available consciously with others emerging under hypnosis, of intrusion into her bedroom by humanoid beings, and being taken into a strange enclosure and subjected to intrusive surgical-like procedures. In 3 hypnosis sessions, we were only able to scratch the surface of what Sheila seems to have undergone. Yet joining her in exploring the mystery of these experiences and giving her the opportunity to express the powerful repressed affects that are associated with them has been therapeutically effective. In addition, Sheila says that her relationship with her husband has improved considerably. One could argue that Sheila's clinical improvement was the result of confirming a set of false beliefs or delusions. But there is nothing in Sheila's tough-mindedness to indicate a proneness to delusional thinking or even suggestibility. Furthermore, psychotic individuals with delusions do not generally improve when their delusions are reinforced, as too much psychological energy must be invested in the belief system at the cost of other functioning. We might also consider the benefit that accrues when one becomes part of a community of belief, as in certain religious groups. But the abduction phenomenon runs counter to contemporary social belief, and Sheila, like almost all abductees, finds the idea that these intrusions, whatever their source, exist in reality to be altogether unwelcome. If anything, she is additionally traumatized by her acknowledgement of the actuality of the abduction experiences. Finally, there is the witnessing of Dr. Waterman, who was initially a skeptic about abduction experiences, but open to working with me. Having known Sheila for more than 7 years, he saw her responses under hypnosis as authentic, reflecting powerful traumatic experiences with no apparent source other than what Sheila reported during the sessions. The abduction phenomenon runs counter to the notions of reality of the Western scientific worldview. We believe it is simply not possible for these events to be taking place. Yet we have so far no conventional explanation for what individuals like Sheila are experiencing. Sheila herself wrote of her case to Dr. Frankel. It simply does not make sense in the world as I know it to be. But as Freud once said, theory does not prevent facts from showing up. All that those of us in the mental health professions can ask of ourselves at this time is that we keep our minds open when dealing with phenomena like the alien abduction syndrome that we do not understand, and resist providing explanations prematurely. We would do well to follow Sheila's lead, as she wrote to Dr. Waterman in 1990, "I have left my DSM-3R behind. Listening without knowing, but with a willingness to explore, can in itself be helpful. Although Sheila has had more difficulty than many abductees in recovering the material from her experiences and moving through their traumatic content, she shows the beginnings of a transformational process that has become familiar to me. In association with her own surrender of control, she is beginning to recognize the negative consequences for herself as an individual and for the ecological balance of the planet that our struggle for dominance and control has brought about. We do not know whether this shift of consciousness is simply a byproduct of her working through the traumatic experiences or is intrinsic to the abduction phenomenon itself. It is interesting in this regard that Sheila's experience of acknowledging her interdependence with the alien beings, followed by her concern for the Earth's ecology, occurred when she felt she had to look into the alien leader's eyes and surrender control. The alien abduction phenomenon is a potentially rich source of information for our understanding of ourselves and the surrounding universe in which we participate. But to make